There's a stretch of country where your phone gives up before you do. They call it the quiet zone. It's not a rumor. It's a real patch of land where transmitters are throttled, towers stay dark, and the sky feels cleaner because there's nothing buzzing through it. The locals will tell you they sleep better there. They also won't look you in the eye when they say it. Roads don't so much arrive in the quiet zone as they fade into it. Your radio turns to static. Your GPS loses its confidence. The air takes on that dry, copper taste you notice around transformers. And if you listen hard enough, under the wind and the cicadas, you might hear nothing at all. Not silence, dead air, the kind broadcasters avoid like sin. There used to be a relay tucked in a valley out there, a Cold War leftover nicknamed VESPER. Officially decommissioned, unofficially, it never really stopped. Some nights, if you aimed a battered shortwave at the right slice of darkness, you'd catch a carrier that shouldn't exist, and a voice that never quite sounded alive. This story isn't about ghosts in the usual sense. It's about signals that never die, and what crawls through when a human being keeps the carrier steady too long. Tonight, we're going to unlock VESPER. And if you hear your own name on a frequency you never tuned, don't answer.
My name's Maya Ortiz, 34. Broadcast engineer by trade, freelance by necessity. I fix sick transmitters, resurrect dead consoles, and talk people out of buying the wrong antennas. I don't chase legends. But I do take paying work, and the email said, survey/decommission VESPER relay. One night inside the fence, cash. No callback number, just coordinates and a gate code. By the time I turned off the state road onto a two-lane that forgot it was paved, the sun was coming down in tired strips. The landscape leaned, hollow barns, hayfields going to seed, ridgelines stacked like half-remembered thoughts. A wooden sign at a county line warned, "Quiet zone, limit RF emissions." My phone surrendered to 1 bar, then none. The map app spun and gave me the digital equivalent of a shrug. Good. I like machines better when they can't talk back. The dirt road into VESPER started where an old chain-link fence tried to pretend it still mattered. The keypad on the post was sunburned plastic. I typed the code from the email. It buzzed like it was surprised. Then the gate rolled a grudging foot and stuck. I shouldered it the rest of the way, metal grinding like teeth. The first thing I heard inside wasn't birds or wind. It was a hum, not loud, but present, like a throat clearing 3 rooms away. Engineers have a dozen words for hum: 60 cycle, ground loop, filament, bad cap. This one didn't pick a number. It just was. VESPER looked small on the map. It wasn't. A scatter of cinder-block buildings adopted by weeds, a guide mast on the hill like a pencil stabbed into the sky, a long, low transmitter hall with louvers that once breathed hot air. The parking lot still had the faint ghosts of painted lines and the nails of bottle caps pressed into tar. I killed my truck, and the quiet ballooned. No traffic, no power lines singing. My ears reached for a noise floor and found floor. The transmitter hull door was steel and heavy, with the kind of handle you only see in places that expect to be evacuated. It stuck half open, then surrendered with a cough of dust and a breath of air that tasted like ozone, hot dust, and mouse life. The smell took me back to night shifts in dim rooms where the only company was a rack light and coffee you wouldn't admit to drinking. I clicked on my headlamp and stepped into a corridor painted the bureaucratic green that exists to not be looked at. The equipment room was first on the right, and there they were. 3 tall transmitter cabinets, mid-century beasts with glass front doors and iMac tubes the size of milk jugs. Their pilot lamps slept at 0, their meters dead, but my skin pricked anyway, the way it does when you stand too close to a cage full of angry electricity. On the wall, a rack of patch panels labeled A feed, B feed, dummy load, with brittle tape, and a hand-lettered placard, Keep carrier, do not modulate. Under it, smaller, like the writer ran out of nerve, except at 030Z. A rolling chair with one missing wheel sulked by an old Collins console. Next to it, a logbook lay open under a film of grit. The last line was 30 years old, but the ink hadn't faded much. 18 oct. Carrier hold successful. Tail subdued at 033Z. Gauge, minus 73 dBm. L. Not my monkey, not my circus. I was here to check the bones and photograph the ghosts. I took out my camera and the digital recorder I use for notes and walked the line. The filament transformers weren't warm. No latent heat, no tick of cooling metal. The cabinets had their backs off. Someone had pulled a pair of 4 1000As and laid them like sleeping hearts on a towel. Every cable was still dressed with lacing cord, the way old-timers do it. Clean, proud, like church. In the back, a room with a dummy load, a big oil-filled resistor bank designed to drink a transmitter's entire scream and burp it as warmth. A sign on its side said, "No swimming," as if someone had once dared. The oil level marked half, stained at tea color. I knocked the tank with my knuckles, and the sound came back heavy, like a deep breath under a blanket. The hum I heard outside grew louder near the far wall, where a heavy door stood marked "Control." The handle had a discipline to it, polished by worry. Inside, a desk, 2 battered headphones, a reel-to-reel machine, and a transmitter control panel with a big, idiot-proof carrier toggle and a small, arrogant mod key guarded by a flip-up cover. A paper taped above them. Carrier on, 2200 to 0500, local. Do not speak on the line. If tails rise, increase neutral loading. If names begin, open dummy 3 dB. If they answer, leave the building. I took a long breath through my nose and held it until my heartbeat stopped sounding like footsteps. I set my recorder on the desk and started the survey out loud because talking makes rooms behave. I said, "VESPER relay," and my voice sounded too big in the smallness. Control room intact. Transmitter hall, 3 cabinets, at least 1 stripped for parts. Power appears off at mains. Dummy load present. Documentation kooky, but present. I walked the power room anyway. Knife switches down, breakers open. Someone had tagged the service with a red lockout that still held. Good. I wasn't interested in becoming a conductor for nostalgia. Back in control, I sat. The chair sighed like old vinyl. The headphones smelled like scalp and time. I put them down again. There's a way some gear makes you feel watched, not haunted, observed. Vesper wasn't alive, but something had learned the shape of people here and hadn't unlearned it. Sun slid off the hills, the room cooled. My breath fogged the edge of a dirty window. I thumbed through drawers, patch cords, an SWR meter, a box of Band-Aids fossilized into the shape of help. Another logbook, older, cloth-bound, edges foxed. The first page had neat script.
To the night tech. Keep the line. Do not modulate except at the half. If the dead air moves, it is not dead. Record nothing between 0033 and 0033Z. ES. A line beneath it, added later in pencil. If you hear yourself on the return, you're not alone. Something outside thumped, metal flexing in a temperature swing probably. My headlamp threw a soft triangle across meters that would never move again. I checked the time, 9:17 p.m. 1 hour until the carrier window on the taped card. I wasn't going to throw a switch, obviously. Decommission means do no harm. But I wanted to hear what dead air sounded like in the birthplace of it. I pulled my own handheld receiver from the bag. No transmit, strictly RX. No risk of bleeding into anything, and in the quiet zone, even a whisper of RF would have nowhere to hide anyway. I clipped on a long wire, snaked it along the baseboard, and tuned through the dusk roar of shortwave.
spherics popping like distant flashbulbs, whistlers slurring down the band, the polite cough of a number station half a world away. At 10:01 p.m., something thin and perfect combed through the noise. A carrier, razor straight, clean, where nothing else should be. No modulation, no tone, just a presence. Like finding a line drawn with a ruler across a thunderstorm. Okay, I said to the room, to my recorder, to the version of me that didn't believe in anything. So, someone nearby is still running a hold tone. I followed the carrier upward and down, bracketing it. No sidebands, no drift. It didn't belong to the ionosphere. It belonged to a cable not far from the wall I was leaning on. The hairs on my forearm stood in a pattern I could trace from memory, 60 cycle. But the mains were dead. The hum I'd been ignoring settled into the bones of the desk. It wasn't audible so much as positional. There, not there. There again, like a person walking behind you at exactly your pace. 10:17. The carrier didn't waver. I put on the house headphones because superstition always loses to curiosity, and slid the volume up until the nothing became a kind of pressure in my jaw. I heard it then. Not a voice, a shape of a voice, like the mouth of a tunnel promises a train. 3 soft rises, like someone testing a throat that wasn't theirs. My recorder's little red light blinked. Hearing movement on the dead air. No modulation, not noise, a form, like the carrier is breathing. I flipped through the log to the last week of October, 30 years gone. A different hand, block letters, tired edges. 22:13, line feels heavy. 22:41, dead air shifted. 00:30, half, 3 minutes, do not answer. 03:05, heard my name. 03:06, heard my mother. The hum climbed up the back of my neck. My name is not a rare one, but the way my body braced made me feel like it had already been said. At 10:29, a tick, not in the receiver, in the building, like a relay pulling a duty it forgot to resign. The panel in front of me had a row of jewel lamps, all dark, but the carrier toggle, stiff, locked under a metal loop, twitched a hair, and then was still. Not funny, I told the empty chair beside me. The taped card above the switches stared back. Do not speak on the line, except at 0030Z. I checked my watch, did the Z-time math automatically like old training waking up in my hands. The half wasn't for another 2 hours. The carrier thickened, not louder, closer. In the headphones, between the pressure and the ache, I heard what a sane person would call imagination. The faintest tale of sibilance, like a mouth forming an S it was too shy to say. I took the headphones off, and the room's normalness came back so fast it made me dizzy. Concrete, metal, night insects brave enough to live in a quiet where they could be counted. I walked to the transmitter hall because movement is the only spell I know. My headlamp found a meter dressed in dust but smug in its center. A field strength monitor with the needle asleep just left of mid. I tapped the glass. The needle crept a hair to the right and stopped, as if to say, I could wake if you asked nicer. Down the row, the antenna patch bay had a jumper still punched from A feed to field. Someone had left the station, pointed at the world, and then cut the throat at the mains, as if trusting momentum to do the rest. Somebody is still feeding you, I said to nobody and the building and whatever had learned to be a nobody inside it. Back in control, I stood in the doorway a long minute before trusting the carpet again. My receiver still held the carrier like a breath. My recorder blinked a sleepy red. The big clock over the desk rolled its guts forward a minute. 10:44. I didn't sit. I leaned. Engineers are, by culture, horizontal animals until fear asks us to stand up. The headphones lay where I dropped them, cups face down like they were listening to the desk. When I picked them up, they felt warmer than the room. I said, "Vesper," and the word tasted like someone else's mouth. I'm not here to, and then stopped. because it's stupid to talk to buildings and stupider to let them interrupt. On the wall behind the console, a corkboard held Polaroids curling at the corners. Men and women in night shift faces, a birthday cake with 0030 piped in icing, a handwritten note pinned crooked, saying nothing back. Every sound in the body has a twin in a room like this. Heartbeat in the dampers, breath in the ducting. I held still until I could tell which was which again. When I finally sat, the chair said, "You again," in vinyl. At 10:58, something like a footstep drifted down the corridor. Once. And then the aftersound people make when they decide not to come in. I said into the recorder, softly, because loud felt like a dare, "Hour 1, building secure, power off. Carrier present from an unknown source, likely local. The dead air is not dead. It moves." I clicked the recorder off. The hum leaned in close enough to fog my glasses. And somewhere very far away, and very close, on a line that should not have carried anything at all, something that knew how to wait, took one more patient breath.
The second hour began with a tick. Not from my watch, not from the wall clock over the console. This was deeper, like the bones of the building flexing, or a relay that had waited 3 decades before deciding to do its job again. I was still in the control room, though room felt wrong now. More like a lung. The air kept expanding and contracting without my permission. Every time I exhaled, the carrier in my headphones seemed to inhale. Walking the corridor. I decided to move, partly to prove I wasn't frozen, partly because corridors are honest. They show you if something's following. The hallway outside stretched long, painted in that lifeless green, the kind that tries too hard not to matter. My headlamp slid across plaques bolted over doors: storage, power, workshop. All dead, all empty. But the hum followed me. Not in volume, in placement. When I walked forward, it walked forward. When I stopped, it waited. At the far end, a steel door marked Archive. The handle resisted, then gave with a tired cough. Inside, rows of metal cabinets, half open, folders spilling like ribs, old reel tape stacked crooked, boxes labeled with dates that died before I was born. The air smelled of mold and acetate, and underneath, faint and sharp, the sting of ozone. I pulled a tape at random. The label, handwritten, 0030Z, do not play back. I put it back very carefully. Back to control. When I returned to the control room, the carrier was still there, unwavering, like a taut wire. My receiver's needle hovered steady, no drift. My recorder blinked its patient red eye at me. I sat down again, the chair sighing like it had been waiting. Out of habit, I spoke into the mic. Hour 2, survey continues. No power restoration attempted, carrier still strong. Possible external source? Local feed left hot? Unlikely. This feels self-sustaining. I clicked off. My own voice sounded foreign. The headphones lay where I'd abandoned them. I shouldn't have. I put them back on. The carrier pressed against me like a thumbprint on the inside of my skull. At first, nothing. Then a shift, a smear of sound so subtle it might have been my pulse. But it stretched too long, bent in ways a heart can't. It was shaping consonants. And then, clear as if whispered in the next chair, Maya. I tore the headphones off. The room looked the same. Dust mode still danced, the logbook still lay open. My breathing scraped too loud in the silence. I flipped the logbook to a fresh page. There it was, again, a 30-year-old hand. 0231, heard my own name. 0227, do not acknowledge. 0228, it repeats until you answer. I closed the book and pushed it away. The corridor again.
Something about being still felt worse than moving, so I forced myself back into the hallway. My boots scuffed on cracked tile, each step rehearsed in the echo. I passed the power room, paused. The switchboard still stood, breakers all thrown, service tagged and locked. Dead. But my skin itched like the room hummed with a current anyway. On the wall, someone had scrawled in pencil, barely visible, "The dead air hears." The second whisper. Back in control, the headphones were warmer than the room again. I didn't put them on. I didn't need to. The sound carried without them now. A voice. Not through my ears, but through my teeth, like jawbone conduction. "Answer." I gripped the recorder, forcing my voice steady. Hour 2:27. Direct auditory event. Voice using my name. Instructed not to respond. "I won't." The air vibrated. The voice overlapped me. "Won't you?" The carrier thickened, pressing the walls outward. The control desk shivered, papers fluttered, though no draft moved. I shoved the recorder into my pocket and stood, heart hammering, every instinct screaming at me to leave, but leaving meant crossing a valley drowned in silence, with no coordinates, no compass, no signal. And somehow I knew the signal wouldn't let me go. The hour closes. At 11:59, the watch clock stuttered. The second hand twitched backward, then forward, and stopped dead on 12. My watch ticked on, stubborn, alone. The carrier hummed steady, and just before midnight, the voice came again, clearer than ever, close enough to fog my ear. Half past, half past, half past.
Midnight in the quiet zone doesn't feel like midnight anywhere else. It doesn't arrive with fanfare, no cars, no dogs, no TV glow leaking through curtains. Just a pressure, a tightening, as if the dark itself remembers you're in it. At 12 o'clock, my watch ticked steady. The wall clock above the console, though, still held its second hand stiff at 12. A frozen throat, waiting. The carrier in my receiver didn't change pitch, but it felt closer, like it was crawling inside the wire instead of riding along it. The voice returns. I hadn't put the headphones back on, but I didn't need to. The voice was in the room now. Low, even, steady. "Maya, Maya, Maya." Every time it said my name, it sounded less like a recording and more like an attempt, as if the signal wasn't just replaying my voice, it was practicing it. I opened the logbook with shaking hands. An entry in cramped script stared back. 0030Z, the half. Carrier modulates by itself. Do not speak back. 0032Z. If you do, it knows you. 0033Z. If you don't, it waits. The relay room. To prove I still had a body, I left the corridor again. The corridor was darker than before, my headlamp beam swallowed quicker. The equipment racks in the transmitter hall seemed to lean, the dead tubes glowing faintly and afterimage, though I knew they weren't lit. When I pressed my hand against one cabinet, it was warm. My skin recoiled. I checked the breakers again, still down. Power was impossible, but the steel carried a faint, pulsing thrum, like a heart. The half past begins. 12:29. The carrier hissed louder in my receiver. A faint modulation teased the silence. Not words yet, but cadence, syllables without breath. The air in the control room thickened, the smell of dust and hot metal blooming though nothing was on. 12:30. The half. The carrier broke. For 3 minutes, it wasn't steady. It carried something else.
Not numbers, not code, a broadcast. At first it was just tones, climbing and falling like someone learning to whistle. Then it became a rhythm. 3 knocks, silence, 3 knocks. My stomach dropped, the same cadence I'd read in the notes. And then at 12:31, it spoke. Carry the line. Static swelled, then cleared. Another fragment. Names belong to us. The voice bent in ways speech shouldn't, like it wasn't bound to lungs. But I understood. Every word hit too clearly, too human to be mistake. The temptation. My recorder was running, red light blinking, but I didn't dare talk into it. The taped card above the switches said it clear. Do not speak on the line. But the voice pressed harder, closer, as if leaning across the desk to meet me. Maya, are you there? My throat locked, my jaw ached from holding it shut. Because the logbook was right. If I spoke, it would know me. The carrier flared, hiss rising like surf, and in the white noise, other voices flickered, children, women, dozens, maybe hundreds, each repeating names like a roll call of the lost. One name made my chest freeze. Elena Ortiz, my mother, dead 12 years. The 3 minutes end. At 12:33 on the dot, the modulations stopped. The carrier flattened back into perfect sterile hum. The voices died like a cord yanked from the wall. The silence left behind was worse. I slumped in the chair, my fingernails dug into the recorder so hard they left half moons. I forced myself to speak because the human voice feels like a shield in places like that. Hour 3. At 0030Z, carrier broke pattern. Direct speech detected. Recognized my name. Recognized my mother's name. Resisting urge to answer. I clicked off. The logbook trembled under my hand. The last entry 30 years ago read, "At the half, it learns. At the next, it calls."
After the half, the air never went back to what it was. The carrier returned to flatline perfection, but the room had memory now. Every surface felt like it was leaning in, waiting. The dust motes in the lamplight hung slower, heavier, as if gravity itself was paying attention. I'd read 100 logbooks in my career, engineers making tidy notes about current, voltage, modulation, but none of them taught you how to sit in a control room after it spoke your mother's name. The corridor changes. I left the console just to keep from answering. The corridor stretched the same as before, bureaucratic green walls, peeling linoleum, water stains shaped like continents. But my headlamp didn't behave the same. It only showed me as far as I needed, 10 feet, maybe less. Beyond that, the dark had texture, like fabric bunched too tight. My boots crunched on grit, once, twice. Then a third sound joined, half a step behind. I spun, lamp cutting across empty hall. I told myself I was tired, adrenaline hallucination, but the echo didn't time with me anymore. It was late, like someone learning how to follow. The workshop. I ducked into a room marked workshop. Pegboard with hooks, empty where tools once hung. A bench with soldering irons corroded into sculptures. A typewritten sheet still taped above. Always tin both ends. But the oddest thing sat on the bench. A microphone, military style, hand set with a push-to-talk key, cord coiled and cracked with age. I picked it up, instinctively, then dropped it. The cord wasn't plugged into anything. Still, the carrier in my receiver thickened when I touched it. The building wasn't just remembering, it was wired to listen. back in control. When I returned, the logbook had shifted. I don't mean someone had flipped it, just that it was open to a page I hadn't left it on. The handwriting there was jagged, hurried. 0147, dead air followed me in corridor. 0211, microphone hums though disconnected. 0235, the walls carry it now. 0250, they're not waiting for the half anymore. I shoved the book away like it could bite. The new modulation. At 1:55 a.m. local time, without warning, the carrier cracked. Not at the half, early. The modulation this time wasn't voice, it was a heartbeat. Low, slow, steady, pounding directly into my skull. My chest seized as my own heart tried to sync with it. Each thud rattled the desk, rattled the windows, rattled my teeth. I tore the headphones off, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't in the phones, it was in the walls. The building pulsed, concrete flexed with every beat. The spiral of rebar inside must have been singing with it. The keeper's note. On the corkboard above the console, a post-it had curled loose. I hadn't noticed it before. I pressed it flat. In faint pencil, almost erased. If it finds your rhythm, it can use your breath. I clutched my recorder, whispering between gasps. Hour 4. Carrier broke early. Not voice, heartbeat. The building is resonating. The corridor follows. Microphone live, though disconnected. VESPER isn't just rebroadcasting, it's rehearsing me. The hour closes. By 2:59 a.m., the pulse slowed, stretched, and finally receded. The carrier thinned, then returned to flat hum. My own heart stuttered, trying to break away from it, like shaking off a dance partner that didn't want to let go. The room sagged into silence again. My ears rang with phantom beats. I leaned back in the chair, palms flat on the desk, whispering to the empty space around me. Don't answer. Don't answer. Don't answer. The wall clock still hadn't moved from since midnight, but my watch ticked past 3.
By the 5th hour, I'd stopped pretending the hum was background. It was the foreground. Everything else, my breath, my heartbeat, the scratch of my pen in the logbook, felt like it was trying to keep pace with it. The carrier didn't wait for the half this time. It slipped into modulation on its own, like a restless sleeper mumbling through dreams. At first, just static folding in on itself. Then the shapes came back, sibilants, vowels stretched wrong, and then clear. Maya. Not like before. This wasn't a stranger's attempt at my name. This was my own voice. The imitation. I froze, headphones half off, trying to decide if I had just hallucinated. But it came again, pitched exactly like my tone when I introduced myself on voicemail. This is Maya. I ripped the phones off. My recorder blinked, still rolling. I replayed the last 10 seconds. Nothing but hum. So the signal wasn't just mimicking, it wasn't letting itself be captured. The corkboard note from earlier screamed in my head. If you hear yourself on the return, you're not alone. The mother's voice. I thought it would stop there, but at 3:47 a.m., the carrier cracked open again. This time, the voice that poured through wasn't mine. It was hers. Elena Ortiz, my mother. The cadence was perfect. The way she used to say my full name when she was angry, vowels drawn out, consonants clipped, the exact sound I hadn't heard since we buried her 12 years ago. My throat closed, my legs moved before my brain, backing me against the doorframe of the control room. The voice went on now, softer, familiar phrases, childhood fragments, brush your teeth, lock the door, don't talk back. None of it random, all of it mine, pulled from memory like threads yanked out of fabric. The archive again.
I stumbled back into the archive room, desperate for something human, even if it was just mildew and rust. I pulled open another drawer. Inside, reel after reel, neatly labeled by date. Some from the 60s, 70s, all marked the same way. 0030 to 0033Z, do not speak. I lifted one reel. My skin crawled. The tape inside had warped, stretched as if something had tried to push outward from the plastic itself. On the wall, someone had scrawled in marker, "The half is how it learns, the rest is how it becomes you." The corridor watches. Back in the corridor, my headlamp sputtered. For a split second, in the beam's jitter, I saw movement at the far end. Not shadow, shape. My own outline standing still, head tilted. When the lamp steadied, it was gone. But the hum shifted. Now it was exactly behind me, no matter which way I turned. The 5th hour closes. By 3:59 a.m., the voice in the carrier spoke again, low and patient. "Stay. You already belong." I whispered into the recorder, voice cracking. "Hour 5. The signal has learned my voice. It has learned my mother's. It's using them to push me toward response. I can't answer." The wall clock above the console stayed dead. My watch ticked to 4. The hum never stopped.
By 4 a.m., the silence of the quiet zone wasn't silence anymore. It was crowded. Every breath I took, every step I made, the carrier seemed to mirror it. The dead air wasn't repeating, it was anticipating. The first memory. At 4:07, the hum changed pitch, just slightly, like someone sliding their finger along a glass rim. Then, out of nowhere, the control room smelled wrong. Not dust, not ozone, cafecito. Coffee the way my mother made it when I was 10, burnt just enough, sugar dissolving too fast. I froze, recorder clutched to my chest. Then the carrier broke and her voice came through again. Not just saying my name this time, singing. Off-key, the exact way she used to hum while making breakfast. Solamente una vez. My stomach twisted. That song was buried deep, something I hadn't thought of in decades. I stumbled to the doorway, and the corridor had changed. The hallway, as a house. The green paint was gone. For a moment, the walls shimmered like plaster, with frames hung crooked. Family photos. My family. One of me at 5, gap-toothed, hair in crooked braids. Another of my parents, younger, smiling. I blinked hard. My headlamp flickered. The walls snapped back to Vesper's bureaucratic green, empty, bare. But the photos still burned behind my eyelids. The hum followed, steady, patient. The second memory. Back in control, I put the headphones on because I needed proof I wasn't unraveling. The carrier held, flat and perfect. And then it cracked. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was me. 4th grade, science fair. The volcano didn't work. The voice was my own, but not present. It was 10-year-old me, embarrassed and close to tears. Then static. Then another fragment. 17, first kiss. He laughed. You pretended you didn't care. I ripped the headphones off, heart slamming. The carrier wasn't pulling random words. It was broadcasting my own memories. The logbook confirmed. The logbook sat open, waiting. My eyes found the next entry, buried mid-page. 0422, the line uses memory as bait. 0430, smelled my father's pipe. 0434, saw my childhood dog in corridor. 0450, do not follow. I slammed the book shut, but my hands shook so bad it fell off the desk. The third memory. At 4:40, the carrier surged again. This time, it wasn't voice, it was soundscape. A kitchen fan,
a creaking chair, and then laughter. My father's laughter, low, warm, filling the room like he was sitting right there. I turned slowly toward the door, and in the corridor, silhouetted at the far end, I saw him. Not whole, blurred, wavering, as if he were made of bad reception, but the height, the slope of his shoulders, the way he tilted his head, it was him. "Papa!" The words slipped out before I could stop it. The figure lifted a hand, not waving, beckoning. The pull. I stepped forward. 1 step, 2. The hum deepened, vibrating through my ribs. My breath fogged in the hall, though the air wasn't cold. Then I remembered the logbook entry, "Do not follow." I froze. My father's figure tilted his head again, then pixelated, breaking into static like a bad TV picture. A moment later, the hall was empty, but the carrier hummed louder, like it was pleased. The hour ends. At 04:59, the voices faded. The smells, the visions, the laughter, all gone. Just the carrier, flat and steady. I whispered into my recorder, throat tight. Hour 6. The signal isn't just speaking, it's pulling memories. Smells, sounds, faces. It used my father. It almost got me to follow. If I had, I didn't finish. Because the truth was, I would have followed. And something inside the dead air knew it.
5 a.m. isn't morning in the quiet zone. It's a deeper kind of night. The hour when your body starts begging for sunrise and the dark laughs in your face. The hum had grown so constant that silence would have sounded wrong. My ears buzzed even when I cupped my hands tight against them. The carrier breaks again. At 5:06, the carrier bent. Not like before. This wasn't memory, this was prophecy. The first sound was my own voice, but older, rougher, hoarse. Hour 7. Vesper isn't... Static cut it off. Then again, clearer, it knows what I'll say before I say it. I slammed the recorder off my desk like it was hot metal. The logbook fell open in the same motion. The page waiting for me was blank except for 3 words scrawled across the center. Don't write yet. The corridor tilts. The hallway outside had changed again. I could feel it before I saw it. My headlamp beam bent sideways like the light itself was refracted. The floor seemed to slant though my boots stood level. Every door I passed looked longer, stretched thin like reflections in warped glass. And the sound followed. Not behind, not ahead, but inside my skull. My own voice again, but desperate. Maya, you never leave this place. The mirror scene. At 5:20, the modulation rose into a shimmer. I made the mistake of looking into one of the dusty observation windows along the corridor. I didn't see myself. Not now me, anyway. It was me, but gaunt, hollow-eyed, hair streaked with gray. My mouth moved before I did. Don't sit back down. If you sit, it wins. I staggered backward, hands smearing dust off the glass. When I looked again, the reflection was normal. Just me, pale, shaking, headlamp crooked. But my pulse refused to calm because the warning was mine. The control room's trick. When I finally forced myself back into control, the reel-to-reel was spooling. Both reels turning, tape running, though I hadn't powered anything. Through the room's speakers came my voice, calm and measured like I was logging notes. Hour 7. Confirmed. Vesper doesn't just replay the past, it generates future echoes, already logging what I haven't yet said. This ends with me carrying the line. The words chilled me worse than the temperature, because I hadn't said them yet, and part of me knew I would. I yanked the power cord. The reels kept turning. The half approaches again. 5:28. My watch ticked steady, but the wall clock twitched, the second hand jerking forward a notch for the first time since midnight. The hum in the carrier swelled, thick with anticipation. I knew what was coming. The half. And sure enough, at 5:30 on the dot, the carrier broke wide open. The future broadcast. This time it wasn't fragments. It was full sentences. My sentences. Hour 9, the walls are breathing now. Hour 10, I can't tell if I'm the one talking. Hour 11, the door won't open anymore. Each line stabbed into me like deja vu sharpened into a knife. I clutched the recorder, whispering into it, despite the rule. Hour 7. Carrier is broadcasting future logs in my own voice. If this is real, it means I'm already trapped in a loop. If it's bait, it's almost working. The carrier roared back an answer, louder, almost triumphant. And then cutting through it all, my mother's voice again, soft as a lullaby. Maya, don't fight it. You'll stay with me. The hour ends. At 5:59, the modulation cut out, the hum flattening back to its endless tone. The wall clock ticked once and stopped again. I sat shaking, every muscle cramped, whispering to myself, to the dead air, to anyone. I haven't said those things. I won't. But even as I said it, I could still hear my future voice laughing in the carrier.
By 6 a.m., the quiet zone had turned into a cage. The hum no longer lived in the wires. It lived in the walls. Every time I leaned on the desk or brushed my hand against the corridor paint, I felt it vibrating back, a pulse, patient, steady, alive. The first lock. At 6:12, I tried the front door, not because I thought I'd leave. I just needed to know I still could. The handle turned, the lock clacked, but when I pulled, the door didn't move. Not jammed, not stuck, just unyielding. The hum spiked like a chuckle. I pressed my shoulder into it. The steel didn't budge. Behind me, faint in the receiver on the console, my own voice whispered, "The door won't open anymore." The future broadcast, coming true. The corridor narrows. Back in the hallway, the geometry had shifted. It wasn't wide enough anymore. I could still walk it, but my shoulders brushed the paint on both sides, and the green color looked wet, like something breathing just under its skin. When I passed the power room, the breakers rattled in their housings. Though locked down, they vibrated in time with the hum, like they wanted to snap back on by themselves. And from inside the dark, a voice rose, not mine, not my mother's, a dozen voices, all whispering together in rhythm. Stay, stay, stay. The dummy load room. I forced myself into the dummy load chamber at the far end because engineers find comfort in hardware. The massive oil tank stood waiting, no swimming, still stenciled on its side. But the oil wasn't still. It rippled, surface trembling in time with the hum. As I stared, faint shapes surfaced, blurry as if seen through glass. Faces, dozens. Their mouths moved in perfect sync with the voices in the corridor. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my recorder. My note came out hoarse. Hour 8. The dummy load is reflecting them. Faces, like the signal carries what it's already consumed. The building isn't just haunted, it's populated. The oil hissed like water on a stove. I ran. The control room traps.
When I got back, the console had shifted, literally shifted. The heavy desk now sat angled, blocking half the doorway. The reels on the tape machine spun without tape, clacking empty metal, while the speakers emitted the faint sound of breathing. Not static, not hum, actual breath. Slow, steady, inhale, exhale. I froze, recorder shaking in my hand. My future voice returned through the speaker, calm and certain. By hour 10, you'll understand you were always meant to carry it. The clock moves. The wall clock hadn't moved in hours, but at 6:59, the second hand lurched forward one notch, then another. Then it stopped again, resting at 6:59. The hum rose, higher than it had all night, like the intake of a lung before a scream. The building shivered, dust rained from the ceiling, my ears popped. And just before the hour turned, the carrier modulated one last time, whispering in 1,000 voices at once. "Half soon, you'll speak, you always do."
By 7 a.m., the building didn't feel like concrete anymore. It felt like a throat. Every wall pulsed faintly with the hum, like veins under skin. The air pressed inward, damp and electric, the way it feels right before lightning strikes. The door is gone. I went back to the front entrance one last time. The steel door was still there, handle still cold, but the seam between door and frame was gone, like the wall had simply grown around it. I pressed my palms flat, smooth, seamless. My watch ticked on. The wall clock above the console stayed dead. From the receiver came my own voice again, calm and tired. Hour 9. The door is gone. She's part of the station now. The she hit like a knife. It wasn't me saying it, it was someone else, logging me as if I were just another name in the book. The corridor breathes. The hallway was tighter now, like it was inhaling. When I walked, the walls flexed, just enough for my shoulders to slide through, then settled back behind me. The air carried my footsteps ahead, repeating them half a beat later, perfect echoes that weren't mine. At the end, near the archive, a sound drifted. Not static, not voices. A baby crying. Thin, distant, helpless. I froze. That sound had no place in an abandoned relay, but my knees went weak because I knew it. I'd lost a pregnancy in my 20s. Nobody knew but me. And the sound that filled that corridor was exactly the sound I'd once imagined, the sound I'd grieved. The carrier was pulling things I had never spoken loud. The control room turns on me. Back in the control, the reel-to-reel machine had stopped clacking. Now it played back clean tape. No hiss, no pop, just silence. Then, out of that silence, my voice. Not from memory, not from the future. Right now me. Hour 9. I'm too tired to fight. If anyone finds this, I'll already be part of VESPER. The signal doesn't want visitors. It wants company. I staggered to the desk and yanked the reels off their spindles. They spun on the floor like coins, still humming, faintly, even without tape. My throat burned with the urge to scream back, but the taped card above the console glared at me. Do not speak on the line. The names return. At 7:44, the carrier bent again. Voices spilled through, dozens, hundreds, all names, all perfectly clear. Some were strangers, others weren't. Neighbors, friends, dead uncles, my mother again calling me to dinner, and then my own name over and over, shouted, whispered, sung, Maya, Maya, Maya.
The sound rose until it was all there was. My ears bled with pressure. I dropped the headphones. The names kept coming through the bare air. The 9th hour closes. At 7:59, just as the weight felt unbearable, the voices cut, not to silence, but to breathe. The entire building exhaled in one long, low gust. Dust swirled, papers lifted, my hair whipped forward, and in that rush of air, faint but undeniable, I heard my own voice whisper directly against my ear. "Next hour, you'll speak." By 8 a.m., the quiet zone wasn't quiet at all. The hum was no longer sound, it was atmosphere. Every breath I drew tasted of copper, like I'd swallowed a dying battery. The corridor flexed with each step I took, narrower and narrower, as though the building was digesting me. The carrier never broke, it just waited. The dead logbook. The logbook lay on the console where I dropped it, pages spread. But new words filled the paper, handwriting that wasn't mine, but bent to mimic it. "Hour 10, she finally answered. Hour 10, the line is hers now." My stomach turned. I hadn't said anything yet, not out loud. But the station had already written the ending. The half arrives. At exactly 8:30, the carrier widened. The hum swelled until it shook the ceiling tiles loose, dust raining over the desk. The reel-to-reel spun though it was empty, screeching like metal in pain. Then the voices came. Not fragments, not memories. A crowd. Hundreds, maybe thousands. All shouting over each other, yet perfectly clear. "Maya, Maya, Maya." I slammed my palms over my ears. It didn't help. The voices weren't in the air, they were in my blood. Then silence. A single voice cut through. My mother's. "Answer me, Mija." The breaking point. I stumbled from the console, heart pounding. The corridor twisted under my boots, narrowing until I had to scrape my shoulders to pass. At the far end, the archive door stood open, light spilling out, white, steady, like an exit. But when I reached it, it wasn't the archive. It was a room full of equipment, consoles, racks, microphones, dozens of chairs, and in every chair a figure slumped, half seen, like bad reception, each with headphones clamped on, each whispering into a dead mic. Their voices filled the air, not answers, but attempts to answers. And one chair was empty, waiting. The choice. Back in control, the console lights flickered for the first time all night. The carrier toggle glowed faint red. The MOD key winked green under its guard. The taped card above them stared like a dare. "Do not speak on the line." The hum swelled, filling my chest, pressing against my teeth. The receiver hissed with static until one single word punched through. "Now." I picked up my recorder, voice shaking. Hour 10. The station, it's cornered me. It wants my voice on the line. If I answer, maybe I live inside this signal forever. If I don't. I stopped, because the air around me vibrated with unfinished sentences, my unfinished sentences. The logbook flipped a page by itself, ink spread like veins across the fresh sheet. My eyes locked on the words. At the half, she carried it. The room pulsed, the carrier howled. I felt my throat open against my will. And then my voice, not mine, echoed through the speakers. "This is Maya, holding the line." Epilogue. When a research team entered Vesper months later, they found the building stripped of power, breakers still locked. In the control room sat a recorder, battery dead, red light frozen mid-blink. The last log entry in the book. 10:30. Carrier steady. Line held. Maya Ortiz. And if you tune shortwave near the quiet zone on certain nights, you'll still hear it. A perfect carrier. dead air that isn't dead. And sometimes, through the static, a calm female voice, holding the line. This is Maya.